Good evening, everybody. Good evening. You are here and you came for our volunteer celebration and debrief. We are so incredibly glad to see you because so far 2020 was an amazing year and 2021 has been an equally amazing year. But after January 5th, kind of for all the wrong reasons. So I want to take a moment right now to thank all of our volunteers, all 44,000 plus of you who made 2020 and the beginning of 2021 such an incredible experience, such an incredible experience for democracy. So tonight, we are going to be celebrating our victories. And even though 2021 got off to a really rocky and rough start, thanks to all the work that all of you have done, we were able to be very successful. We were able to educate voters in Arizona and Texas and Georgia, and those voters stood up and fought back against the voter suppression bills that were being introduced. Georgia, all by itself, saw more than 40 bills, as did Arizona. So the voter suppression legislation was an onslaught. Justin, new slide, please. So tonight, what we are going to be talking about is our overall work, what we did, and the impact that it had. And we all, when we were doing the work, and some of the work was so new, we had never done anything like this. We had no idea how it would turn out. Well, it turned out better than we had a right to expect. We're going to hear from some of our in-state partners, and then we're going to look at our continued work, our future work, and then I'm going to probably pull out my crystal ball and prognosticate about what's happening moving forward. So I want to introduce one of the organizers of tonight's event, a person who, if you are on Slack, every morning you get this is what we're doing today, and he's out there working to inspire you, our own Justin Metzmark. So Justin, take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. So beginning in 2021, with very little break from the January 5th runoff elections, we started off with, let me go to the next slide there. One more, with Georgia legislative advocacy. And here we have actually our totals from so far through the first half of 2021. And that is an enormous number of calls, postcards, and texts for a time that is not during a giant election season. So that really is an incredible amount of work by all of you. So I'm gonna focus in a little on Georgia, but first, this is what we've generated from all of those calls, postcards, and texts. We've generated 52,000 emails to elected officials and 6,000 calls, 1.7K tweets. And this is a ginormous number for state elected officials who rarely get contacted by their residents. Normally, everyone just thinks of the federal people, but the state people is often where all this voter suppression legislation happens and where a lot of decisions are being made. So beginning in 2021, we started off with Georgia fighting against voter suppression. And some of these bills here SB 74, SB 71, HB 531, and provisions in them we fought against and successfully kept from becoming law. And some of these other bills are from Arizona, Texas, and also a few others from Georgia that we helped kill. And the ones in bold are ones we specifically worked on. But all of these are ones that died that were voter suppression legislation that would have restricted access to the ballot. And we helped make this happen. So in Georgia, we started off by fighting against voter suppression as people came out trying to both overturn the results of the November and January 5th elections and try to prevent those results and people coming out to vote, try to prevent them from coming out in those numbers ever again. So we made a total of 52,000 calls and 40,000 texts to residents and generating 4,000 calls to elected officials and 25,000 emails to all of them. So to talk to us a little bit more about what the voter suppression situation in Georgia and all the work that's been going on there, we are joined by Ray Mcclendon. Ray Mcclendon is from one of our great partners at the Atlanta NAACP. So a committed civic engagement activist, Mr. Mcclendon has worked as political action chair of the Atlanta NAACP for the past 5 years. Ray is also a founding board member of Lift Every Voice for Democracy and Every Voice, Every Vote. Mcclendon has served as president of 100 Black Men of Atlanta, chairman of the National Association of Securities Professionals, an executive member of the Atlanta Committee for the Centennial Olympic Games, and the presidential appointee for the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation. Ray, it is so great and we're so grateful that you have joined us today. If you are there, please unmute, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Justin. It is a great pleasure to be with all of our celebrants tonight. I want to give you all a round of applause for everything that you did for us here on the ground in Georgia. And I want to step back from the numbers that Justin just gave you that were amazing numbers and made a difference. But I want to go back to the origin story on this, which is what we were able to do with the help of all of you in the 2020 election, and how we made such an extraordinary difference by having the technology, the digital footprint, and the expertise that you all brought to the table that made a tremendous difference for us here and supported us in ways that we would never have been able to do on our own. So we just want to thank all of you for all that you did in so many ways on the ground across the entire state of Georgia. And the reason I bring that up is that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Even before the ballots were completely recounted and recounted again, the Republicans in the House and Senate were already caucusing at the end of 2020 to determine how they were going to perpetuate the big lie that was being told and make changes to voting laws in Georgia to make it more restrictive, to disenfranchise more people. So we knew this was coming. We thought we would have a few days off after the great victories that we had in the runoffs on January the 5th. But of course, we knew we couldn't even take January 6th off because there was an insurrection going on at the Capitol. But be that as it may, we knew these bills were coming, and with the presence of mind of all of you, you made a difference in beating back even more restrictive laws than actually passed. So kudos for all of the outreach from folks like Josie, we were talking almost every day, to Gabe, to all of those who were on the ground working with you, working with all of the volunteers. It really made a difference. Andrea alluded to it earlier, that these state representatives and state senators were not used to being bombarded with calls and emails on a moment's notice, because they were changing things. They had over 40 bills, and they were changing those bills in the House and the Senate every day. And so we were madly making adjustments to our scripts and text scripts and letter writing campaign on the fly each and every day. And so thanks for this incredible team that you put together. Now, SB 202 is the final bill. It started out as 2 pages, just 2 pages, ended up 90+ pages, where they consolidated as much as they could get. Some of the most onerous provisions they did not get in, but nevertheless, we do have some challenges. So I'm going to talk a little bit about them. Not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight because we are celebrating, but there's an overarching theme here that I want to make sure we get to. First of all, ID. We know that ID can be a problem in many of our communities of color and in disenfranchised communities. Everybody doesn't have a driver's license. So the additional requirements that they're putting in place on ID is a challenge that we're going to have to deal with. There are some estimates, maybe 250 to 300,000 voters in Georgia that don't have any form of government issued ID. Joe Biden won the election by 11,779 votes. So that margin of people who may not have had ID would be significant. Absentee ballots. Again, absentee ballots in the middle of a pandemic made a tremendous difference. They have now whittled down from 180 days to 78 days the time frame for requesting an absentee ballot. We know not only was it the pandemic, but it was also the systematic dismantling of the U.S. Postal Service that also created some challenges and why we needed that extra time. That's still going on to this day. So shortening the time frame, what that has to do with voter fraud, nobody knows. So cutting down that time frame is something that we're concerned about. Ballot drop boxes. Ballot drop boxes were a major success, especially in the metro areas where many of our voters don't have the ability to get to the polls during the traditional times because they are essential workers. So that became that was a great way for them to have 24/7 access to providing mail-in ballots in a safe and secure way, given the other challenges that we were having. It's real interesting the way that the law was crafted, and under the guise of making it broader and more diverse, what they really did was penalize the large metro counties, because now you have to have a minimum of 1 per 100,000. Sounds great. Sounds like, well, everybody now is on level playing field. It's exactly the opposite. County like Fulton County went from having 38 drop boxes down to the maximum being 8. So think about DeKalb County, Gwinnett, all of the metro counties now are going to have dramatically fewer drop boxes going forward. And also they will not have access to drop boxes around the clock, and the drop boxes have to be in a government building location. So all of these things, under the guise of being fair and equitable, will have a disproportionate negative impact on many of our metro areas of interest to us all. Early voting has changed. Once again, it was trying to be touted as expanding early voting, but the issues are we have more flexibility in many of the larger counties. What this is doing is restricting what the larger counties would have had flexibility for in previous election cycles. one that gets a lot of attention. We all know about line warming, passing out food and water in lines. And that's something that we are already working on to figure out how to challenge. There'll be many of you have already talked about coming to Georgia just to pass out water in line and dare somebody to arrest them. The solicitor in Gwinnett County has already said they're not planning to prosecute anybody for these tactics. So it's just a ludicrous provision. There's some other notable changes. Again, don't want to get bogged down in certifications and in the weeds on many of these things. But there were some other changes, but the biggest thing that we need to keep our eye on, and in some ways it appears they're devious because they throw in these inhumane things like line warming and passing out water to take your eye off of the ball on what they really are doing. And the most egregious part of this bill is associated with them taking power away from the Secretary of State, which is a duly elected officer who was the head of the state election board. And now the Republican Party will, in the state legislature, will have the right to select the deciding vote on the state election board. That is a big deal because of the additional powers that they have given to the board, whereby now that board will have the authority to go in and remove any county elected elections officer that they deem to be underperforming. So who do you think they're going to say is underperforming other than large counties that have significant voters of color that don't vote in a way that they agree with? So that's what we're looking at. Now, let's step back from Georgia for a moment and let's see what is now a wave going across this country. And these bills are all being written by the same people. We know how meticulous Andrea is, and she was one of the first ones to say to me that some of these bills, they forgot to even make some of the changes to make sure the states were correct. So we know that they're cutting and pasting these bills, but there's one insidious thing that they're doing, and that is, okay, they got by with this in Georgia, let's extend it and make it more insidious in the next state, and more and more. So that's how you get to a Texas, which now has even more draconian overturning provisions, and what you're seeing about to come up and be talked about, I'm assuming, about Arizona. So what we have to recognize is that we have a national problem. We will continue to fight on the ground in Georgia with the help of folks like you. We're gonna defeat this national pattern state by state if we all continue to stay together and have the same energy that we had in the 2020 general and the runoff. This is what is going to make the difference for us to overcome. So we celebrate, but we're re-energized to continue to fight.
Hey, thanks, Ray.
Thank you so much, Ray. And Ray, it was just an absolute pleasure working with you. It's amazing when we can combine the forces of a national organization and the wisdom of local groups. I think that is really where our sweet spot is. And also, thanks for reminding us that this is not just a celebration, but this is an understanding that we should be proud of the impact that we have helped to create as volunteers, but also what comes with that is an obligation. Right now, everyone who hasn't checked out of politics right now, congratulations, because this is really the time when you are most needed. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about Arizona real quick, because I actually have some more positive news. First, unfortunately, Hannah Howell, who was the legislative let's see, she was I forget what her exact position is, but she was one of the coalition leaders of One Arizona, and she couldn't be here tonight because she's sick, unfortunately. But she wanted to thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work that you've done. And I'm going to talk a little bit quickly about the Arizona voter suppression laws that we have fought with the help of the One Arizona, which is a coalition of voting rights groups in state. So this is another one of our kind of local, local insight on the ground, whatever they need, and us doing national phone banks to support that. So we made 22,560 calls to in-state residents. That is not bad for a little bit of a wonky phone bank that's talking about legislative advocacy and patching voters through to the representatives. Those numbers are great. We've sent 4,500 emails to elected officials in Arizona. And what are all of these things about? What actual pieces of legislation are they about? Well, we were focusing on 4 voter suppression laws in Arizona. Now, some of you may not know this, but Arizona is controlled by one party. I don't think I need to mention which one, in the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. So this is just to set the stage for the bills that we're opposing. These are kind of up against a massive power structure, and any progress that is made in this direction is really only because of the grassroots work that you have been doing and on the ground organizations have been doing. So this is like fighting against gravity here. And you'll be happy to know that out of the 4 bills, the 4 gnarly voter suppression bills that we have been helping fight with One Arizona, only one of them has passed. This is despite total party control, complete trifecta. Even the bill that has passed, 1485, which is the evil Pevel Purge bill. Evil isn't in its official title. That's an editorial edition by me. That was pushed from purging people after 2 years to purging people after 4 years. So even though that bill passed, we effectively doubled the amount of time that grassroots organizations have to litigate against it, and to, in general, just mobilize support to prepare people from before they are purged from the permanent early voting list. That's what PEVL stands for in Arizona. So that's the one bill that's kind of the bad news situation. And even in that bill, we made a difference. But there were 3 more bills. 2 of them were killed outright. And this is just an unprecedented level of attention these bills are getting from national organizations, and you are a huge part of that. So there's 1593. I'm just going to summarize them real quick. 1593 shortens the time that voters can request an absentee ballot. That was just totally killed. That's done. 1713 made it harder, stricter to get an absentee ballot because it made the voter ID requirements more draconian. That was absolutely killed. And then 1106 was a third bill that was kind of a weird, smaller in scope, but that increased the penalties for out-of-state residents who are saying that they were voting in state. It was basically targeting college students, and it did a couple other bad things, but I'm not going to get too much in the weeds there. So out of those 4, only 1485 passed, which I cannot emphasize enough how crazy that was. We, as Andrea said, we had no right to expect this much success. Now, this doesn't mean that it's all over. Both the Arizona and Texas legislatures are talking about restarting their legislative session because we've done such a good job in ramping up opposition that they're having to actually change how they legislate. And they're hoping to sneak these bills in at a time when they're receiving less attention. So what you are doing absolutely makes a difference. 3 out of the 4 voter suppression bills in Arizona have been prevented from passing. And that is just really outside the realm of what I would have thought is possible before this. So I just wanted to thank all of you, and just to remind you that these calls really make a difference. So yes, without further ado, I am going to kick it over to Josie, who's going to talk a little bit about the Texas side of things. And Josie, let me know if I left anything out in Arizona that you can think of.
No, thank you, Gabe. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So as you all probably read in the news, Texas has had some crazy things going on in its state legislature. Just like Arizona and Georgia, it is also a trifecta, but a trifecta on steroids. Nonetheless, so one of the biggest bills that you all helped us fight against was SB 7. Before I get into kind of what this bill is about, together we made almost 12,000 calls to in-state residents, almost 5,000 text messages, 762 calls to elected officials, and 437 calls to elected officials. This is huge, and it is also in collaboration with lots of other organizations that were really putting the pressure on Texas legislators. So SB 7, I'm sure you all know bits and pieces about what this crazy bill is. For example, it would have basically ended souls to the polls by making early voting on a Sunday to only being after 1 p.m. They now claim that that was a typo. Was it really? We don't know. It would have banned drive-through and 24-hour voting. Over 170,000 voters use this method just in Houston, with over half of those voters being Black and brown voters. This bill would have outright banned drop boxes. It would have created additional barriers for voters with disabilities and for absentee voters. It would have criminalized poll workers and much more. But despite the fact that Texas has, trifecta on steroids, on Monday, this bill died in regular session. This is a huge deal for Texas. We could not have done this without you all and all the amazing on the ground organizations there in Texas. That said, unfortunately, Governor Abbott is planning to call 1, if not 2 sessions, special sessions for Texas, and SB 7 is more than likely to come back. So we still need you. Get ready probably to make some more calls into Texas to keep this horrific bill from becoming law. But until then, we should celebrate this huge victory where SB 7 is at the moment dead, and that's a big deal. I don't know if we have a slide for this, but another state I wanted to quickly highlight, while it's not a target state of ours, we have done a good bit of work in Connecticut where they have just passed 2 constitutional amendments through the state house that would create no excuse absentee voting, as well as make early voting law. So that's a really big deal that is actually moving through the Senate basically as we speak. So hopefully that will be another big victory for us to celebrate. Now, beyond fighting all this crazy voter suppression that is happening in different states, we've also been focusing on something that is incredibly important, and that is energy democracy. We have been doing this in Georgia with an amazing organization, We the Plug Though, to try to engage members of rural electric cooperatives on energy justice and how they can fight for who are struggling with really high electricity bills and more. And together we have already made 130,000 postcards have been sent to in-state residents, and 1,385 calls have been made to in-state residents. This is really incredible. I don't want to get too much into this because I don't know if Juan was able to make it. She's been having some issues with her internet, but we have a beautiful video that she put together for us to celebrate all the work we have done around energy democracy in Georgia and all the work that is still to come. So I will still introduce her because she's too incredible not to introduce. Juan Smith has served for more than a decade as a purpose-driven power strategist and movement builder with a passion for dismantling oppression in every form, energy democracy, and community empowerment. As a co-founder of We the Plug, though, and organizing director of Georgia Conservation Voters, she works in a coalition with communities and local leaders to educate, shift power, and advance equity to achieve radical racial, environmental, and economic justice for Black and marginalized people. Juan firmly believes, as you have done to the least of these brothers and sisters, you have done unto me. So I am really excited to welcome Juan in her wonderful video. Gabe, you have to unmute yourself.
Sincere apologies. Hi, friends. My sincere apologies. I am so sad that I could not be with you this evening. I mean, I know we're all virtual, but it just feels different when we have the opportunity to see each other and respond and type in the chat and wave in real time. For whatever reason, I had some horrible internet issues today, but I did not want to miss this opportunity to celebrate. I have my celebration hat. I have my party favors, and I am so glad to be a part of the Center for Common Ground volunteer celebration. Woo! Well, I am Juan Smith, co-founder and lead organizer with We the Plug, though. For those of you who are not familiar with We the Plug, though, we are a self-organized group of community members, activists, and organizers who have made it our business to stand with individuals around energy justice. We want to be able to connect using both culturally and contextually relevant and radical language with everyone from grandmothers to cousins, aunts, uncles, friends, neighbors, because energy justice is real. We want individuals who are historically marginalized, oppressed, low income, and individuals of color to understand how they are impacted by energy injustice, utility injustice, and what we can do, right, to resolve all of the issues, all of the challenges, and make it better. This work is important because energy justice is economic justice. Energy justice is racial justice. Individuals disproportionately experience higher bills, lung disease, cancer, asthma, and this typically falls on, again, individuals of color, Black, brown, indigenous, and low-income folks across the entire country. Most of the time, people aren't aware that they can advocate for themselves and that there are elected officials. I know everybody's ears just went up. There are elected officials who are at the top of the food chain, who are peppered all throughout the process and the decision-making, and that accountability is necessary. So why are individuals from and volunteers from Center for Common Ground involved and partnered with We the Plug, though? Well, because the elected officials are involved, right? Because the work that we do is work of civic engagement. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to democracy, democracy, democracy. Elected officials regulate energy. And so we want to get individuals involved in holding their elected officials accountable. We want them to know what the challenges are. We want them to know how they can operate different. And what this does is along the road to the midterms, individuals have those civic engagement muscles primed and they are ready. As an organization, Center for Common Ground has been in relationship with them for hyper-local issues, so they know that we're not just swooping in when the issues impact us and concern us, but that we are with them every step along the way. So that when it's time for Georgia to step up again, that individuals who perhaps are typically uninterested or unengaged have already been prepped and primed and made a part of the process, and they are ready to go. So once again, Georgia can show up and show out. But this is just our way of engaging in a continuum of relationship, a continuum of civic engagement, and ensuring that it is hyper-local and bringing individuals in at the place, at the critical pain points like energy that impact them every day. So I just want to give a big hoorah to all of the phone bank volunteers. Woo, 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 woo. I want to give a big hoorah to all of the text bank volunteers. Woo, 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 woo. And a mighty, mighty, mighty shout out to all of the postcard volunteers. Your efforts really made a difference in phase 1 of our municipal utility justice outreach. Individuals all across Georgia, in small towns with 1,600 individuals, 1,600 residents, and median incomes of $23,000 annually, spoke to us, and we heard their cries, and they told us about the unfair policies and practices that were associated with their utilities, because their cities were small, because they had very low operating budgets, and because there was no one to provide oversight or help. And that was all because of you. There is no way, there's absolutely no way we could have reached out and connected with individuals in Sandersville, Georgia. There is no way that we could have contacted residents in Everton, Georgia, or all across Georgia in the small nooks and crannies and corners of the state. But because of you, we were able to connect. Folks saw your phone calls, they saw your text messages, they saw your postcards, and they turned out to the meetings. Now we are creating strategies. So not just so individuals can talk about their issues, but so that they can draw strength from hearing each other, and so that they can come together collectively as community and strategize to hold their elected officials accountable. This is municipal election season this year throughout the state of Georgia. So if there are individuals who need to run, qualifying has not happened yet, and we are having these community conversations so that individuals can qualify, or so that they can have the knowledge when they go to the polls this November and vote in these hyper-local elections. So again, we're in phase 2 now. Thank you to everybody who signed up to get postcards, to write postcards for the We the Plug Though Muni Justice, because our next meeting is July the 7th, where we're gonna go back with all of the outcomes from the data and the strategies. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who decided to take part in postcard phase 2. And there's a couple more out there, so if you want to get involved, there's still time. Thank you again. We the Plug Though appreciate you. I appreciate you. Thank you to Dee, Diva, Brian, everyone on the postcard team. Thank you to each and every one of you who wrote a postcard, who took the time to put a little color on it and make it your own. Thank you to everyone who phone banked. Thank you for everyone who text banked. And thank you, Andrea. I love you, Center for Common Ground. I'm so disappointed that my internet is going off and on. But I love you, I appreciate you. Your work and your labor is not in vain, and we're on our way, roll to the midterms.
Thank you Juan. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And another thank you, just as Juan said, to all of our volunteers. Now, we do still have postcards to write for We the Plugs, though. So postcards are available, and I know I saw the link flying by in the chat, centerforcommonground.org/postcards. I believe it is. Get it out of the chat. Don't believe me. Let's see, centerforcommonground.org/postcarding. Thank you, Justin. And when you go there, you will see our marvelous postcard video explaining how we do postcards. And then there will be all the instructions you need on how to get Center for Common Ground postcards. When we originally designed our postcards last year and did Vote Your Power and Power to the People, and our artist Justin added those yellow stripes, which kind of sort of those streaks look like electricity. Who saw this coming? But these are ideal postcards for this campaign. So there are postcarding opportunities. Also, Virginia's having a little election. So because it's a primary, we have sent 300,000 text messages to voters in Virginia, letting them know that there is a primary, letting them know where they can go and vote, because Virginia now has early voting. And when you early vote, where you early vote during the early voting and where you vote on election day are different. We also have get out the vote calls for all 5 regions of Virginia: Northern Virginia, Central Virginia, Southwest Virginia, Hampton Roads. So we have calls that you can make to all of those locations. Yes, the big, huge push in Virginia will really be in September, when we have early voting for Virginia for the general. Virginia will be electing a governor, a lieutenant governor, and attorney general, and all 100 seats of the Virginia House of Delegates are up. So far, we have sent 436,000 postcards into Virginia. We did voter registration postcards. We will do GOTV postcards for the general. We didn't for the primary. Now, looking ahead, we are still very, very actively involved with the S1 for the People Act campaign, postcards and phone calls going to Senator Sinema in Arizona. We will also be getting involved with S51. S51 is DC statehood. And so on June 24th, I'm jumping way ahead, we are going to be doing a presentation that we call Southern Voices, introducing the Douglas Commonwealth, which is the name that the state of DC has chosen for itself. Washington, DC will soon be the federal enclave where the seat of the US government is. When we get outside the federal enclave, that will be the Douglas Commonwealth. And we are also going to be supporting, as soon as it gets introduced, HR 4 and I believe S4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Now, what is the difference between the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act? We do need both bills, and here's why. The For the People Act is designed to overturn basically because it is federal law, it will supersede many of these bad state laws that have been introduced. In looking at Georgia's bill, SB 202, which allows them to overturn and get rid of election officials that are not suppressing the vote the way they believe it should. The Senate has done some modifications to the For the People Act on the Senate side, and they are looking to address this issue. Remember, the For the People Act was originally introduced before we knew the extent and had the language for a lot of these voter suppression bills. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Bill is designed to prevent bills like this from even being introduced. Any state that would want to make changes to their election laws would now be subject to pre-clearance by the Department of Justice. And I am going to say thank you to the 47 states who introduced these voter suppression bills, because now this makes it very, very easy to insist that we put all 50 states under pre-clearance. And then locally, we have been working on building and staffing and funding our democracy centers, which are designed to uplift local community organizing. So just as Juan Smith was talking about local pain points in terms of energy bills and the high electricity energy burdens, we also have communities that are suffering from food insecurity. And our Hawkinsville Democracy Center actually opened a food pantry to address that issue. In Florence, South Carolina, the citizens of that area and surrounding areas don't have clean water. So the Florence Democracy Center has started a project where they are generating clean water from the sun, and their ultimate goal is to create a bottling company that employs local people, and it will be a cooperatively owned business. We will be opening Richmond on Juneteenth, June 19th. In Richmond, we are looking at educational issues and working on those. We're also looking at broadband issues. Yes, Richmond is not rural, but near the Democracy Center, there are 5 in Richmond. They call them courts. In other states, they would be known as low-income housing projects. People there simply can't afford the internet, which means a lot of their children didn't go to school for basically an entire year. So we are working on bringing a free broadband solution to those communities where families will now be able to have internet. So this is something that we're working on, but Richmond will launch on June 19th. Roanoke very, very quietly launched all by itself with a voter registration drive and a food basket drive. Roanoke basically quietly went into business last weekend. So the democracy centers are really designed to be hubs in communities where we have people who can vote but don't vote, who work with the local community on resolving whatever their pain point is, so that they will be open to not only hearing about voting and elections, but people in the community themselves will become voting rights advocates. Is there another slide, Justin? Or have I covered?
I don't
All
believe
right, we
so.
did
I think you're
starting
covered.
phone bank. I'm
And
good.
Gabe's the
All
one
right.
controlling the slides right now.
Oh, all right, all right. Well, great, thank you. So let me run down the upcoming Thursday night presentations. The Virginia primary will be on Tuesday, June 8th. And Steve Rosenfeld and I will be hosting a, I guess, recap of what went on with the Virginia election on Thursday. So the outcome of the Virginia primary, especially the governor's race, could have a very interesting impact on the November election. So we'll be working with that. Oh, thank you. So I'll be doing a road to the midterms on June 10th. On June 17th, this is going to be very, 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 very special. We will be working with or talking to 4 generations of Black civil rights and voting advocates. You will have an opportunity to meet my 96-year-old mentor, Dr. William Ferguson Reed. Yes, he is a medical doctor. Yes, he became the first elected African-American to the Virginia General Assembly after Reconstruction. So Dr. Fergie Reed, who was also the co-founder in 1955 of the Richmond Crusade for Voters, will be joining me. So he will represent the first generation. I will represent the second generation. Hopefully, many of you remember Cliff Albright of Black Voters Matter. Cliff Albright will be joining us, and he will represent the third generation. And then finally, some of you may remember a young man from Georgia, Evan Marlborough, who created Peaches to the Polls and the Georgia Youth Poll Worker Project. Evan will be joining me as well. And then finally, on the 24th of June, we will have Charles Moreland. Hopefully, Senator Michael Brown will join us, and a number of other folks who will be talking about DC's quest for statehood and also a national march for DC statehood in remembrance of the 1963 march for freedom, peace, and justice. So we have a lot of events that will be coming up. So hopefully you will be able to join us. So thank you very, very much, Gabe. You can stop sharing. Oh yeah, there's the RVG and Black Voters Matter. They will be hosting a freedom ride from Mississippi all the way to Washington, D.C. They will make D.C. on, I believe, June 26th. So a lot of things are happening in the voting rights world because we've been told Senator Schumer plans to bring the For the People Act to a vote in the Senate the week of June 21st. And we hear it could be as early as the 21st. It could be as late as the 23rd, with the idea being that if we run into issues with the filibuster, there will be a National Day of Action on the filibuster on June 24th. Yes, I know. I said all of it and barely took a breath, but I had it all in my head, so I just needed to get it all out. So anyway, thank you to everybody for joining us. And I want you to give a great big hand to our team who put all of this together.
It was really Justin. Justin did all of it. I feel like he deserves an extra special shout out.
It can't be a
All
party
right.
if no one shows up.
All right. Well, we add people. So yay to Justin. And for those of you who may not know, I know he looks a lot older, but Justin is the youngest member of our team. Justin is still in high school. So, boy, I don't remember making students like Justin when I was in high school. So a huge round of thanks and applause for Justin. It is exactly 9 o'clock. So that's what I love about a properly designed party. You get to go, you get to get your chair dance on, and then you get to go sit down and go, wow, that woman talks a lot, but we learned a lot. So Ray, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being there and allowing us to work with you side by side. Josie, thank you for being an absolutely, totally awesome, as I knew you would be, Deputy Policy Director. Gabe, yes, you are the man, the person, as our phone bank team leader. And Justin, you can just be anything. So thank you for the wonderful person that you are. I am thrilled that you are part of this organization, and kind of sort of wouldn't mind it if you ended up spending most of your adult life here. So everybody, to the wonderful volunteers, to everybody out there in volunteer land, have a great evening. Bye-bye, and thank you.